shortly before the Sydney Olympics, you shatter your foot in a training accident.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had actually left my college scholarship. So I did 3 years at school, and that was through 99. And the Olympics were coming, and the Olympics were going to be held in like September. So it was a really awkward time. And back then they didn't have all the nice waivers they do now, like Olympic waivers. You could only redshirt if you were injured. And I was like, well, even if I, found a way to do this and I could come back, then I couldn't even come back till the January semester after the game. So I just didn't know. And I was like, but I know I need to train full time. Like, and I know school and competing for school and trying to do like, it's so much. Like the collegiate season is so draining, especially while you're doing school. I was like, I just need to focus on training. If this is my one shot at the Olympics, like I need to go after it. And so I left my scholarship and I went home with about 2 months, rent saved in my pocket. So it was exciting, but it was also stressful because I was like, how am I going to pay rent so that I can do this thing I want to do? And, my dad helped me find an agent who helped me get my first sponsor that paid pretty much just enough so I could like eat and be there and do the thing, it was just like minimal. So I was like, I am living the dream. This is awesome. Right. And then March 8th of 2000, I was in Florida we were at a meet and I was doing like a typical warm up where we do flips or somersaults onto mats. And I was going off of a block of wood. And I came out of this one somersault a little early and I hit both the balls of my feet on the block of wood. And, it hurt really bad. Obviously, I couldn't really move my foot, but we didn't know how bad it was. I had to kind of just sit there and wait till the workout was over so that my coach could take me to the emergency room. So, I'm in a lot of pain just trying to ice things for a couple hours. And he eventually takes me to the emergency room where the doctor just tells me it would hurt more and be more swollen if it was broken. So he doesn't even x-ray it. And we're like wanting to hope for the best. We're like, oh, great. Maybe it's just jammed. It's not a big deal. But I was in excruciating pain that night. And I remember I couldn't sleep and I was stuck there for almost a week because that was how our flights were. And I couldn't get back for like 6 days and I was not sleeping. I was in pain. It was just like such a miserable, this was 3 months before the Olympic trials. We get home and my doctor x-rays it, comes into the room with tears in her eyes and just says, if I'd seen it right when it happened, maybe I could have reset it. I kind of broke the 3 middle metatarsals, but one of the bones actually had lodged itself underneath my foot. And within just those 6-7 days had calcified to the 2 bones next to it. So it was stuck there. So she's like, the only way we can fix this now is to re-break everything, pin it back together, and that puts you out of trials. Like you will not recover in time to go to trials. And I was like, well, what's my other option? And she's like, well, there isn't really one. We could cast it the way it is, but we don't know what that's going to do. We don't know if it's going to be stable enough to jump off of, maybe even walk on. So we just did that because I was like, well, if I have to have surgery anyway, let's just cast it. If it doesn't work, we'll just do the surgery later because it's already how it's going to be. So we just cast it that way. And that first week, that like mix of emotions, I was angry. I was depressed. I was feeling all of it. There was almost a time where I felt almost some relief, because there was this great pressure to accomplish this big goal, but well, now I have a broken foot. So if I don't do it, you know what I mean? Like these weird things come into your head. And like, I thought of all of them. And I just remember kind of feeling the weight of it. Like, have you ever felt that just like the weight of the world feels like it's on your shoulders, especially when it's your dream you're facing and all these things. It's like, it seems to be collapsing in front of you. And I remember just falling to my knees in my living room, dropping my crutches and just like crying out to God, like, how can this be part of the plan? Like I left everything. I left my scholarship. I left my friends. I left everything that was good and right in my world to try to do this thing that I thought I was born to do. And this is my great reward, and I was just having it out, with God there on my living room floor. And I remembered in those moments, like, this was my dream since I was an 8-year-old little girl. And this might be the only time that I get to go after it. I don't care if I have to drag myself up there with one foot, like I have to at least try. I don't want to look back in 5 years and go, what if? Could I have? Like, I couldn't live with that kind of regret or just not knowing. I'd rather go and fail and at least know that I gave it everything I had. And so I kind of had made up my mind in those moments that that's what I was going to do. Whatever it took, I was just going to get there and I was going to give it everything I had. And my coach is as crazy as I am, I guess, because I remember him coming. It was probably like the next morning. He comes banging on my door at like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm stumbling out of, I'm hopping to the door. And I remember opening the door and he's wagging his finger in my face, and I'm like hopping backwards, and he's like, look, if we're going to do this thing, we got to be on the same page, and we got to make a plan going forward, and we can't look back, you know? And I was like, okay. Cause I had already made up my mind, but he didn't know that. And so he was like, oh, okay then, you know? So we kind of decided like, all right, we have to make a new plan. We can't do what we were planning on doing. It's got to be more creative. And he's really creative and good at thinking outside the box. But the one rule he gave me was, we make this plan and we're all in. We can't look back. You cannot look back and say, what if I hadn't broken my foot? What if, like, that's just not even, I don't want to hear about your foot. I don't want to know what could have happened. Like, we are only going forward with this new plan. And I had to buy into that. And he kept me accountable to that. So we did stuff like, we did a lot of video study. You know, I would watch the best divers, the ones I was trying to emulate, but I would also put together like my dives, the best ones that I had done and the order I was going to compete them. And I would watch them over and over again. You know, I'd put on my headphones and listen to my favorite songs that I'd like to listen to in meets while I'm watching these dives. So anytime I heard the songs, it was almost like the dives, you know, would come on an instant replay in my brain. And then when I was supposed to be in the pool, he would take my crutches and I would hop up on my one good foot all the way up the ladder to all the levels. And I would kind of shimmy my way out onto the end. And I would do all the motions, all the actions of my dive. And he would stand on the side and he would coach me. He would coach we called it pretend diving. They have a fancy word. They call it modeling now, but we called it pretend diving. And he would coach me from the side of the pool deck. And it was so weird because I remember moments where I would do something like an action. I was like, oh, you know, that probably make me back off. I'd feel short of vertical on that. And sure enough, he would say something like, nope, you backed off. That'd be short of vertical. And I was like, whoa, how can he see? I'm pretending to dive and he can see what I'm doing. And I started to realize how important this technique was. Like, he could see even on just my actions, I was emulating what I was doing right and wrong. And, you know, I was up there so much. I mean, if there were people in the workout with me, he would make me wait my turn in line, try to feel like I was in there, you know, but it did a lot of things because when you dive, like a lot of times if we take a break from platform and we go back up there, it's really scary again because it's 3 stories, you know, and you're hurling your body off and it can hurt really bad. If you do it wrong, you can get really injured. And so it's scary and it takes a while of being up there again to get comfortable. But I was up there every single day for like weeks on end as I was in this cast and going through this, which I didn't normally do. So I was actually a lot more comfortable during this process, like coming out of it, than I normally would have been. Plus all this extra time I had, I wasn't just doing, you know, 3 sets of my list of dives. Like, I would start to imagine competition scenarios. I knew who all of my competitors were. I knew all the dives that they did. I knew the order that they usually did them in. I knew the order I did mine in. I knew that I was usually really good at coming from behind, but I wasn't good when I was in the lead. Like, I put myself in every situation and would imagine every different thing happening, you know, and do a different scenario every time I was up there. And I just started to put myself in all these different places. And I only had, once I got my cast off, I only had about 2.5 weeks in the water before our Olympic trials, which is like 0 time to prepare for any meet, let alone Olympic trials. But because I was so prepared, like, I ended up winning that meet by 40 points. And I made my first Olympic team, which was awesome. But what it did that I wasn't expecting, excuse me, because if I hadn't broken my foot, I think I would have had a good shot at making that Olympic team. But what I realize now is that if I hadn't broken my foot, I would not stood on top of the podium at the Olympic Games. But breaking my foot and going through all of that prepared me for every possible scenario. And the finals was a little crazy for me, but because of what I had been through, it prepared me for that moment, you know?